What does it mean for Oakland to be selected for 100 Resilient Cities?
Well, obviously, it's quite an honor. Oakland's been getting a lot of accolades in the last few years. One of the most interesting places to visit, one of the greenest cities, one of the most walkable, bikeable cities. But I think what it does is it focuses on those struggles between what Oakland has been and what Oakland is becoming. And I think that specifically it puts us in a circle of cities that are facing the same issues, from whom we hope that we'll be able to share and maybe pull our political clout and our needs together in a way that we create either funding sources or operational plans that can help more cities than just the 100.
So Oakland is unique among the 100, unique along with three others as part of 100 Resilient Cities, and is that you've been selected along with your neighbors in the North Bay. How do you envision that working, and how much collaboration have you had to date, and
Well, I think it will be interesting. I mean, you have sort of a range of cities, but particularly Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco have been in the lead of what we call smart growth planning and green cities initiatives. So, for instance, we all are trying to get to zero waste. We are among the cities that actually collect and compost our food products, and we divert maybe 70 to 80% of our food, all of our waste products from garbage streams. And we also are cities that are planning alternatives and public transportation. So both Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley are really bikeable cities that we're looking at the alternative, the cars. We're investing more in public transportation. So there are a lot of things that are very similar. We have a very friendly competition going already, and sometimes we do collaborative initiatives.
what do you see as some of the economic advantages and benefits of planning through a resilience framework?
Well, I think just going to scale and I think that's what the Rockefeller Foundation is hoping to see, that when we collaborate, will we be able to change the model? So I'll give you a good example. Oakland was the first city to ban polystyrene containers in our fast foods. And when we first started, the cost of those containers was a little expensive. And now that more cities all over California are doing that, and all cities around the Bay are doing it, they're almost the same price. So we can affect the market by our planning and political decisions. We have just recently, the city of Oakland, we're almost about, let me say it again. The City of Oakland's about to finish a project where we're moving our entire public light systems to LED lights. And by financing it in a way over a period of time that the light and electric savings will actually pay for the system. And having that volume and to be able to do that, we're hoping this now will be a model for other cities. Maybe they can get together and do the same thing that we did. We're basically replacing all the lights in the city without spending any money from our general fund.
So that sounds like a very innovative solution. Are there other innovative solutions that you're excited to share as part of the network?
Well, all of these cities live along the San Andreas and the Hayward's Fault, and both of those, we're basically in earthquake country. We're expecting another major earthquake in the Bay Area. So, and we're slightly different cities. So Alameda's is smaller, a little bit more suburban, like San Francisco's, a very dense urban city. Oakland somewhere in between, and Berkeley is a university campus, but so it has that small town feel. But all of us have been working on new retrofit standards for our homes. Berkeley actually pioneered them many years ago, and they're almost done. And San Francisco, but they're a smaller city. San Francisco passed some last year, and I think it's going to take effect next year. And we're about to also pass some retrofit building standards, because where we are, if there were to be a major earthquake, let's say tomorrow, we would lose about 20 1,000 plus rental units mostly in soft story buildings. And that would be a quarter of all of our affordable rental housing. It's where most of our minorities and our immigrants live. That would really change the soul of the city. It's not just the thing of losing buildings, but it'd be very similar to Katrina, where New Orleans is different without the Ninth Ward. And so I've been trying to plan as a mayor and as somebody who started at first on the school board, getting the school buildings retrofitted so our children would be safe, and then working on other reforms and other building standards so new houses would be built safely. But we have an old housing stock. And so to me, this is a real mission. It is something very similar to Katrina. We know that if we retrofit these buildings, it's a very small percentage compared to replacing them. So on a typical home, a retrofit's a few $1,000s, and damage from a major earthquake could be about $100,000. On these soft story apartment buildings with multi-family units, we could lose lives and they would pretty much be wiped out. So the retrofit is a very small cost, but the question is, are people willing to invest in something that is going to happen in the future, and be willing to make that investment to make the city safer and more resilient in the long run? My fear would be if we had the earthquake tomorrow, we would lose a lot of residents, a lot of historic areas, and a lot of, as I said, the soul of the city. So, Oakland's history is born out of disasters. One of our big, really growth periods was in 1906 after the San Francisco earthquake. Tens of thousands of people came over from San Francisco on the ferry, including my great-grandfather and my grandfather and his two brothers. And they stayed. And that sort of gave Oakland a new birth. It had been the end of the Transcontinental Railroad. It had been this sort of small resort-like city. Today, we've recently survived the Oakland Firestorm. Oakland is a very unique city. We have an urban redwood forest in our backyard, and out of that we developed a wildfire district to try to control our vegetation and to preserve the city. We also survived the Loma Prieta earthquake, which is sort of a little earthquake compared to what we're expecting. And even there, we lost about 5,000 homes. And it changed some parts of town. And downtown, which is now the heart of all of our arts and cultural centers, it took us a decade to fix some of these old, beautiful Art Deco buildings and get that area up and going and thriving again. So I think what we have to do now is to plan in a way that should we have a major earthquake, that we're up and running quickly. Oakland is the 5th largest port in the country. I think that's time for the country to look at some of these vital infrastructures, services that serve the whole nation. So there are ports all over the country that don't have enough funding to deal with climate change or with diesel pollution, and in our case we would worry about earthquakes on top of that, but there's hurricanes, et cetera, in other parts of the city. But I think the bottom line, I'm sorry, I said the city. Basically, the nation needs to have some federal plan to how to restore vital infrastructure. So when I visit Japan, Kobe, which is a major port in Japan, they were able to get their port up and running in 2 months because the nation just came together and worked on that. I don't think we have the plans or the preparation to do that. But if you take out the Port of Oakland or the Port of LA, that's a major economic engine for our exports and our trade, and we don't have a national plan for that. So local governments can start talking about that, but we can't solve that alone. The last thing in terms of the spirit of being a resilient city, a couple months ago on Martin Luther King Day, I went to a church celebration of Martin Luther King, and the little girl had a prepared speech, and she said, I'm just putting this speech away. This is what I learned. I learned is it doesn't matter what knocks you down. What makes a difference is how you stand up. And I think that's a lot about what we're doing here. We might have earthquakes, we definitely have poverty, we have violence, we could have forest fires. We could have a lot of different things in my city. There's an issue because I have a high percentage of minorities and a high percentage of immigrants, and there's still not economic justice in the United States, that many of my communities are already more vulnerable than other communities in the Bay Area. So that we know that I have a more vulnerable population. We know that there's a possibility of disasters, but the question is how we stand up. Is how do we plan to make sure that the whole community survives, that we keep intact our culture, that poor people are not disproportionately displaced, and that particularly for our seniors that we take care of all of them. And so that's a lot of, I think, what you're looking at in resilience. That is, how do we stand up quickly? We're a tough town, we get knocked about, but we always stand up. But in that standing up, how do you make sure that there's economic justice and equity?